Welcome to Coryell Roofing, Setting the Standard. Today we have a couple really special guests to talk about higher education and roofing in higher education, the challenges that we face, the difficulties that some higher education entities have to deal with on a regular basis, and how by setting the standard we can help them, help protect them. So in studio today we've got Wendell Olson, who is the Texas Regional Sales Manager for Coryell Roofing, and Kelly Coryell, who is the Director of Sales for Coryell Roofing. Welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Glad to be here.
So both of you guys have had extensive experience in higher education throughout the 6 states that we work in, Texas, Oklahoma, Kansas, Missouri, Arkansas, and Tennessee. And over the years, as you've worked in higher education institutions, which are universities, colleges, two-year entities, what have you guys seen in terms of challenges that you might face, Wendell, when you're working directly with a higher education entity?
Well, the higher education industry is a little bit different because they have to meet different standards on the insurance, and they want the aesthetics of their building to still look professional because they have students coming in that are coming to be a profession. And so the looks of the building, the aesthetics, protecting the investment on the inside, they have a lot of high dollar equipment. They're teaching the future doctors, nurses, scientists that have a lot of equipment underneath. So it's got to be a good learning environment for those kids coming up to be working professionals.
Absolutely. And because it's such a critical environment that needs to be free from disruption, why is roofing such a critical element to that?
Well, when you're trying to learn something, you don't want to have to worry about water dripping on your head or the stained ceilings, moving classrooms. We've had that before where a roof was failing, not one of our roofs, but one of the previous roofs, and they were having to switch classrooms, and there's not enough classrooms available for them to switch. So that's a whole day of learning that they missed out on because they had to shut that classroom down. And so it's just keeping the progress going for the education.
Understood. And we're talking about institutions where professionals are teaching students, and those students have paid to be there. It's either a scholarship, they've chosen that campus. And I would assume that in your dealings with campus administrators and facilities people, that you talk about the importance of giving a safe environment, a clean environment. You don't want any disruptions in the classroom. How important is it to universities that you've worked with, colleges, two-year schools, how important is it to them that they pay attention to roofing?
Well, roofing, it can't go undetected because then the cost is further down the road. However, when you have students in there that have paid to come to school there, and you have crews that are banging and stuff on the roofs that are making noise, you have to be cognizant of that when you're working with the actual campus and the administrators, to know testing dates, to know critical times to be on and off the roof. There's walkways. A college campus is different than a ISD because most students are walking from building to building. So you have to be safety oriented because you have rooftop things that could fall off, or you have walkways that you need to mark off for the students to be safe traveling. And that needs to be less of a headache for the administrator, knowing where are my students protected and where are they not. So we have to take quality standards as far as roofing, but we also have to take safety standards in place as well and meet all those guidelines to make sure everybody's safe, our crews, the students, the faculty. So it's high importance.
It's a mission critical environment.
Yes.
Absolutely. So you just mentioned something that I want to talk to you about and dig in a little deeper, and then we're going to talk to Kelly. You're responsible for the state of Texas for Coryell Roofing and setting the standard for all the education institutions in the state of Texas. So you said ISD, that's independent school district.
Correct.
The majority of your experience has been with independent school districts, K-12 across the state of Texas, correct?
Correct.
And you've got years of experience in that.
15 years.
15 years of roofing experience with K-12 schools across Texas. That has to
Love
be
it.
really challenging.
It's very challenging. And there's a deficit budget now in the state of Texas, and you've got to help them identify needs, help them identify the correct roof system that will meet their insurance requirements. Dealing with a school district right now that is having a storm that hit their building, and there are limitations on their coverage, and it's putting them in a really bad financial situation because they weren't told that up front. So it's best to have that client knowledgeable and not only what's it costing you today, but what it could cost you in the future. And you can't afford some of the things it's costing them in the future because they did not put the right system on. So that's very important to ISD.
Is there a big difference between K-12 independent school districts in Texas and higher education institutions? Or is it pretty much you're dealing with the same type of goal in helping protect them, setting the standard for them, helping them achieve an environment with no disruptions? Is it pretty much the same?
It is not the same. So school districts, they don't think about their roofs until it's too late. They think about their roofs when there's a hailstorm. They think about their roofs when there's a leak. They don't plan. They don't budget for it. They expect that next hailstorm to pay for their new roof system. Now the insurance game is changing, so that's no longer a valid option. Campuses, universities, colleges, they're a different animal because they're protecting their investment like a corporation. Mm-hmm. So they want to budget ahead of time to make sure that there's money in the budget to do the roofs before there is a catastrophic event. So it's a different animal, and the insurance requirements are different. And universities are different from ISDs because ISD can go through a buying co-op and things like that. So can a university, but there's some other criterias that universities look for that most contractors do not meet. We are an MWBE contractor, which is very important to a lot of people because of a minority woman-owned business enterprise. Mm-hmm. They are looking for contractors that meet those criteria, so they don't have to go out to bid, and they can choose their contractor without just taking the lowest bid.
Okay, so in Texas, in your experience in the 15 years that you've been working with education institutions, you've seen that K-12 schools, because of how they acquire or deal with capital projects, they have to be more reactive than you would see in a higher education environment where they're a little bit more proactive because of the funding. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay.
Usually ISDs do not do a roofing project unless there's a hailstorm or unless a bond is passed.
But isn't that human nature? Aren't we all conditioned only to think about our roofs when there's water coming in?
That is correct. Buying a new roof I always relate it to buying new tires. I hate buying new tires, but it's a must.
Yeah.
Because I have to protect my family. I have to protect what's inside my car. I have to protect other people on the road. And so you can't just put on a roof and just think it's going to go away or the problems are going to go away, and you don't need maintenance on it. You don't need to upkeep on it. You don't need to budget for it in the future. So that's how we help a lot of ISDs that don't have the money. Mm-hmm. Say, let us come out and do a free roof assessment, and it is free, and we give a grade. So you might not have the money this year, but we're going to say, hey, you need to prepare 5 to 10 years down the road. Y'all need to start saving for this roof project so it doesn't hit you in that 1 year that you don't have the money. Put that money aside, and hopefully you don't have to have it in 10 years, but you need a plan for it.
So last thing about K-12 versus your higher education entities, I think it would be fair to say that there are some K-12 schools across the state of Texas that are a little bit more sophisticated. Your larger 5A, 6A schools where they're structured a little bit more like a higher education institution. Maybe not from the funding standpoint, but from the facilities and the personnel, they have a really good grip on what their roofing conditions are. To those that aren't, to the lower education, your K-12 schools that don't necessarily have a full facilities team, they don't have the resources on a campus to be able to do planning and budgeting and the things that are needed to be more proactive than reactive, what would you recommend to those schools?
You hit the nail on the head because most of these school districts have 2 or 3 maintenance guys. They have several campuses, but they're not just responsible for roofing. They're responsible for HVAC. They're responsible for the yard work. They're responsible for when the school teacher says her air conditioner's not working in her room. They're spread so thin, and I get it all the time when there's a storm that hits. They said, "Oh, well, our maintenance guy went and looked at it. I think we're good." Mm-hmm. And I always say, "Wow, if I wanted to have open heart surgery, I'm not going to ask my local doctor if he wants to take a look. I'm going to a specialist." So I really think that the school districts need to let their maintenance guys that are good at their jobs, they are very good, they're just understaffed. Mm-hmm. Let them maintain what they are good at and bring in a professional to get a professional opinion, not a pushy opinion, but an honest opinion, and say, hey, this is what you have or you don't have.
True. That's a great point. And over the 15 years that you've been doing this, have you seen that be successful with some of the schools that you make recommendations to?
Yes. So when sometimes they're reluctant at first. There's no such thing as a free lunch, they say.
Right.
But a free roof assessment, we give the free roof assessment. Then I usually get the maintenance director and the superintendent on a Teams call. Used to do these in person, but it's much easier to show everybody on a computer screen and zoom in on what the defaults are. But have a Teams meeting with them and tell them this is what you have and this is what you don't have.
Okay.
And a lot of times we've had districts that it's not a re-roof that they need. They just need some attention. They need somebody to come out and kick the can down the road, per se, to get them where they can afford that roof at a later date. And we have an amazing service department that comes out and helps repair these schools that they don't have to spend the hundreds of thousands of dollars. They only spend $2,000, $5,000. And some of these schools have had leaks for 10 years, but they've just been dealing with it, and it's a part of life. The kids know where to walk around the trash cans when it's raining.
Absolutely. So we're going to come back to that. We're going to talk a little bit more about insurance. We're going to talk a little bit more about getting in front of the issues before you have them, the more proactive approach. But when we look at the state of Texas and honestly the entire coverage area for Coryell roofing, part of our setting the standard is understanding what we have to deal with and the climate that we're dealing with. And I think we can all agree we're seeing more frequent, more catastrophic, more damaging storms. You know, we've looked into the data of that. We've studied exactly why that is, and it goes back 30 years. You know, our climate over the entire nation has increased 1 degree over the past 30 years, and it is causing weather pattern shifts. So it's safe to say right now that schools, educators that literally focus their entire career on educating students now have to be professionals and sophisticated in understanding how to protect their structures too. And that's a challenge, right?
That's a huge challenge. And you talked about climate change. Just this year, we had snow or sleet or hail on the Florida beaches. Yeah. We had hail events down on the coast of Texas. They've never had that before, ever. First time in the history of those areas that they had storms that were winter storms. So the climate is definitely changing. The insurance game is changing, and the educators need to be educated, and we're trying to do that. As far as, do what you have on your buildings really cover you when that event happens? Because it's not if it's going to happen these days, it's when it's going to happen.
Yeah, and we're going to talk about how to protect yourself if you're an educator, how to get out of that hamster wheel, if you will, of constantly trying to catch up to something you're not going to catch up to without having the right systems in place. So Kelly, you as director of sales, you work with schools and higher education institutions all over the southern region. And is this something that you see, the weather pattern, are we seeing more increased activity throughout the southern states?
Without question. It's moving further east, first and foremost. They're kicking up more frequently, more catastrophically, more tornadoes, more hail, more high wind events. Used to be, and you're all familiar with the FM global maps and what's severe, moderate, and very severe. And it used to just hit into Arkansas. Now it's getting all the way into Tennessee. It's going further north. So the way the weather shifted, the information that we have access to nowadays through NOAA, through all our satellites, and radar, it's impressive how fast they're tracking it, how narrow it's getting, and the map's moving.
Absolutely. So to educators in the states that you're responsible for, Kelly, all across the nation, specifically in the South, but these educators haven't really had to think a whole lot about this up until now, and it's changed the climate. No pun intended. It's changed the climate of the insurance industry as well. Tell me about that. Why is that such a challenge right now for even in higher education, which, to clarify, higher education institutions are typically insured by private carriers, whereas lower education or K-12 schools are typically insured by risk pools, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. So if I'm a higher education institution in the state of Arkansas or the state of Tennessee or the state of Kansas, Missouri, Oklahoma, Texas, any one of those, what do I need to be thinking about right now to protect myself?
You need to think about the standards and what system are you going to follow, and what's your long-term plan. You can go out and you can have somebody come in and give you quotes, all different kind of quotes on your roof system. But if they do not meet the standards that are set, and there are multiple standards out there that you can be protected by. So obviously the one we subscribe to at Coryell is the FM approval standards, the FM global standards for moderate, severe, and very severe hail rated.
And that's setting the standard. That's the whole point of what we do, is to go across all of the states that we work with and help people understand you have to protect yourself. You have to. So people that don't, institutions that don't necessarily adopt standards, they're exposed, they're vulnerable. What can happen to them in that situation?
Well, in a situation where you're in a very severe hail rated area and you put a moderate rated roof system on, sometimes you can be not covered by your insurance carrier. Sometimes you can have sublimits. There are obviously high deductibles. You're going to see more frequent damages. You're going to have to replace your roofs more often. It just is not going to hold up to the weather.
And, it's safe to say that there's not a lot of people out there that are friends of insurance companies. When you get into an insurance claim, a lot of times it gets combative, and there's a way to prevent that. And what the schools, the universities have to understand is that if they don't have the proper roof system in place, they're not going to have that coverage. But you really can't blame the insurance carriers, right? Have you seen situations in Texas and all across the South that inferior roof systems have been installed, and then the insurance carriers are so exposed to risk and they have to put limitations and exclusions? Have you seen this?
Yeah, actually going back to what Wendell was talking about earlier with the independent school districts in the K-12 market, it started over 30 years ago.
Okay.
Schools would go out and they would get a quote for long warranty, cheap roof system. Insurance company would pay for it. They put it on 7 years later. They were doing it again and again and again and again. It was just a vicious cycle. Yes, the risk pools, the carriers, they had to adjust. The funds were being depleted and nobody was doing anything to change it. So they had to put sublimits on. They had to raise deductibles. Premiums are going up. It's a vicious cycle that started over 30 years ago and is going to continue unless somebody changes it or sets a new standard.
And it's challenging for the decision makers at these universities. I mean, take University of Oklahoma or Oklahoma State University or University of Texas or Texas A&M, University of Tennessee. All of these universities, and we're just talking about the large universities. There's also community colleges and smaller institutions that have to deal with this on a regular basis as well. But they have had systems in place for many, many years where they use general contractors and bring in roofing contractors, use architects and engineers. But it's pretty safe to say that there's nothing out there that protects them from the elements that we're seeing today, the weather elements we're seeing today. There's nothing out there that protects them from a code standpoint. So that's why you need to adopt standards?
Without question. You are absolutely right. If you look at IBC, the International Building Code, or IECC, the Energy Code Council, that is, for one, protecting the property and the energy escaping the property. The IECC is. So, for example, and this may be terms most people don't understand, but here in Texas, you need to hit R25. That's a restrictive value on the rooftop. And that basically says that the heat isn't going to escape, the cold isn't going to escape, protect yourself from the outside temperature. IBC, International Building Code, protects people. It literally says, here's how you have to build your building so it's not going to cave in. Here's what your walls need to be, et cetera, et cetera. So, but there is nothing that protects the building from storm damage.
What challenges have you specifically faced in the state of Texas that has been, and in working with Wendell on a daily basis, what challenges have you faced where you've seen education institutions that are severely exposed, severely vulnerable because the standards are not in place?
Yeah, you see it again and again, and going back to the point of, long warranty, cheap price. Well, you ultimately get what you pay for, and you're going to be exposed again. So we've seen a lot of school districts A lot of institutions just go in and just choose the lowest bid every time because it looks appealing up front. And on the surface, it looks like they're all the same. That's why standard is so important.
Absolutely. And it's very common. I mean, you can't really blame people for going that path at first glance. You think, I've got the same warranty on one roof system compared to a competitor's roof system. So if I got 3 roofing contractors to give a bid on my project, if you wanted to bid it out, public bid, and I get 3 different numbers, and I typically go with the lowest one as long as the warranty is the same as the other 2, is that a false sense of security?
Without question it is.
Why?
Because they're not built equal.
Okay.
And not to compare, you can go out and get a long warranty on an automobile, but compare it to a high-end automobile. I mean, it may not even have the same warranty. There's just a difference.
And if the roof system, you can have, let's say, a 20-year warranty, no dollar limit warranty on a roof system, and you think that you're protected, but then a vicious storm comes along, and we see them all the time, right? Wendell, you said it's there.
It's there.
They're out there. We're seeing it more and more often. So a vicious storm comes along, and you think, I'm good. I've got a warranty on my roof. Is that the right train of thought?
Wrong. As soon as that roof gets hit by the storm, that warranty is gone. The manufacturer will protect themselves. And as soon as hail hits it or winds over 60 miles an hour, that warranty is null and void.
Okay. So we could have a lot of higher education institutions throughout the South that are really vulnerable right now, really, really exposed. What's the solution?
The solution is get an expert to look at your roof. Obviously, we think we're the best at that by far. We'd love to be up on the roof. Guide people in the right direction, and not every roof needs to be replaced. The fact of the matter is, we give great grades on roofs more often than we give bad grades. But you need somebody honest, somebody reputable to get up there and look and guide you through a long-term path to get out of this vicious cycle.
So it's just like a simple health check, right?
That's exactly right.
You're going in, you're hiring a professional, and you're saying, tell me what I'm working with. And have you seen this be successful, Wendell?
I have, and you know, you're talking about exposure, and I'll get back to your question in a second. So if we've had a school district before that went out to bid, there was a $6 million project, or the competitor was $6 million for not a very severe hail rated roof. We're $7 million. They chose the lesser quote, but they left themselves exposed. Their coverage on a system that's not very severe hail rated, they had $1 million coverage limit. So they saved themselves $1 million up front, but when the storm hits, they're going to cost themselves $5 million because they're only going to get $1 million of the 6. So, and they have a $250,000 deductible. So that's a lot of the exposure they don't understand is they might be going with a cheaper system, but they are exposing themselves for further down the road to be a catastrophic event that could be devastating to that university or school district.
What was the right decision to make?
To actually ask your insurance company, is this roof system covered if I have a hailstorm? Mm-hmm. And the roof that they went with, the insurance company would have said, no, you have $1 million limit.
Okay.
But they did not ask the insurance company. I told them to ask the insurance company, but they chose the lesser. And so they haven't had a hailstorm yet, but they will. And that's when they'll listen that, oh man, we made the wrong choice. Let's save $1 million now, but we're going to cost ourselves $5 to $6 million later.
Absolutely. So Kelly, back to the entire southern region, you know, if we think in terms of higher education institutions, they're constantly expanding their campuses, building new buildings. They have capital improvement projects. And as they think through those projects, they typically work with an architect or an engineer that designs the system, and then a general contractor or construction manager will then find trade contractors to actually complete that project, correct?
Correct.
So if you were the superintendent or even the president of a university, and you were going through building a new facility, new construction, and you had the confidence that you're hiring an architect, the architect is following code, and you have this beautiful crown jewel on your campus. Absolutely brilliant, and you're so proud of it. Are they protected?
No, they're not. I've often seen brand new 120, 150 million dollar buildings with inferior roof systems that the first storm, and if it's big enough, it can punch holes in it and flood the building out. It can happen within months of, it can happen the first day that it's open if you don't put the right system on, if they don't follow the right standards.
It's all about the standards.
All about the standards.
That's why we're setting the standard, correct?
Yes, sir.
So, Wendell, as I look out the window right behind you at this beautiful scenery, not far from us is a campus that you were very close to and worked with, Dallas College, Brookhaven campus. Tell me a little bit about that project.
Well, Brookhaven had patina copper metal roofs that had been held out, and they had leaks everywhere. And so they were looking at replacing that patina copper. Well, taking that patina copper off and going back with new metal roofs, they didn't want to go back with copper. It was very, very expensive. Mm-hmm. So they wanted a better solution as far as longevity, something that wouldn't leak, but they had never thought about the energy side of things. So a metal roof or any other kind of roof system that is not a reflective roof system will absorb the energy. So you're bringing energy onto your building, the heat, the cold elements, and then you're trying to fight it from underneath to be comfortable.
Right.
So the catastrophic hailstorm that they had, and they needed new roofs, they didn't think about, well, we can put new roofs on here for the insurance proceeds, but then we can save money by all the energy we're going to save over the years. And so that was an aspect they had never thought of. And a lot of these universities were built a long time ago, before energy savings roofs were available. So a lot of them have roofs that are absorbing energy, and they have no idea how much money they can save if they have an alternative to that.
So working together with the manufacturer Duralast, you were able to create a solution for the campus that was both aesthetically pleasing, keeping the look of their copper roof systems that they're so proud of since 1974, correct?
Correct.
You were able to come up with a solution that gave them energy efficiency benefits, gave them a long-term warranty, gave them a watertight roof system. Everybody wins.
Everybody wins.
Was that a successful project?
It was very successful.
Okay, so in higher education, in order to accomplish something like that, you have to have an institution that is willing to look at all the options. Is that what your recommendation would be to other higher education institutions?
Yes, the facilities director for Dallas College does his due diligence. He asks all the manufacturers to come in and present and give him all the information, and then he does his own research.
Okay.
So when he does his own research, he knows who he's dealing with, product-wise, warranty-wise, contractor-wise. So he's controlling that process. He is not leaving it up to chance just to get a low bid that's going to be a quality contractor and a quality product.
Right.
He steers that to make sure that he's protected in the future. Because he said he's a little bit older than me, but he said he doesn't want to deal with that roof ever again while he's still working.
Nobody does.
And nobody does. And I said, well, I don't want you to deal with that roof while I'm still working either. So
Seems like a really smart approach.
that's correct.
So Kelly, final thought here. To all the higher education institutions that you work with, that Wendell works with, and the entire Coryell roofing sales team trying to set the standard, what would you recommend to them right now?
First and foremost, get a professional out to look at your roofs. Know where you sit today. You can need that for a multitude of reasons, but you need to document where you are. You need to have annual checkups, much like you referred to. You go get health checkups every year. Get a roof checkup every year. Get somebody to help you with that. Secondly, if you do have needs, use standards. FM has put standards out there that you can follow. It is free to the public.
Absolutely.
There's good contractors will help you find the right system as well. That's what I'd recommend.
Well, there you have it. Coryell Roofing setting the standard, trying to pull standards into an industry of educators that they shouldn't be expected to be the professionals of roofing, but they've been forced to be. So Coryell Roofing is trying to step up to that and help educators through that process by raising standards, setting standards, and offering campus-wide full roof performance assessments, not just for storm abilities, but also for your energy efficiency and many other aspects of it. So Thank you guys both for being on today. This was very enlightening. I think there's going to be a lot of institutions across the South that are going to benefit from this information.
Thank you, Chris.
Thank you.